Hi, this is Dick Halsey. This is part two of Moved or Damaged Cemeteries in Monroe County. Part one was about cemeteries in the city of Rochester. Look for it on YouTube if you haven't already seen it. This, part two, is about cemeteries in the towns of Monroe County. Some of these are very small rural cemeteries. And as you will see, some of these cemeteries have had a bulldozer used to intentionally destroy them. This slide is the same as in part one. So why were cemeteries removed? First, for health reasons, especially before bodies were being embalmed. In the past, there was many epidemics for which the cause was not known. Second, the cemetery could have just run out of burial space. And third, the land became more valuable for other purposes, especially as business property or in some cases as land for new homes. So what are the problems with moving a cemetery? First, the cemetery lines may not be well defined. They may not even know how far the cemetery extends at all. Second, the old wooden caskets deteriorate and they turn to powder over time. And last, some bones just get left behind. Let's start in Irondequoit. The Bradstreet Cemetery was located at 4615 Culver Road. That's across from where Seabreeze Park is now. It only shows on this map from 1924. There are only 10 burials, and they were moved to the Irondequoit Cemetery in November 1961. Old Cemetery was located on the north side of Clobrook Avenue. It shows up on this map from 1887. It was said to just have one burial, that of Harriet M. Cole. I wrote a blog article about this cemetery in 2021. Then someone sent me an email with some more information. So I ended up doing more research and did an update on the blog article. It turns out that there were 5 Cole family burials that were moved from this cemetery to Mount Hope Cemetery in November 1891. There is still this tombstone for Harriet Cole on the site of the old cemetery, even though she isn't buried there anymore. The Perrin Cemetery doesn't show on any map, but we know it was located at 2881 Culver Road, according to the memoirs of Marion Schneeberger. The Irondequoit Presbyterian Church was built on that lot in 1926. Hooker Cemetery is located at 1500 Portland Avenue, north of St. Anne's home. It is shown on this map from 1872. According to variant sources, it was deeded to the town of Irondequoit in either 1824 or 1840, but I couldn't find the deed in Monroe County Clerk's office. In the 1950s, the top layer of soil and some of the tombstones were bulldozed into the creek north of the cemetery. I'm not sure who was responsible, as I've heard a couple of different stories. Those tombstones were then dug out in 1985 by the Irondequoit Historical Society, and they spent many years trying to put the fragments back together again. There are some tombstones in Hooker Cemetery that are still in one piece. There is also this nice large memorial that was placed in 2003. I have a web page with the names of the known burials from the Hooker Cemetery. The Robb Cemetery is between houses at 242 and 256 East Main Street in Webster. A deed from Andrew Robb in 1834 stated that he was selling the land except for the small cemetery lot. So the cemetery was never legally transferred to anyone. I first visited there in 1983, and there wasn't any tombstones at that time. There was a problem with this cemetery for many years. One of the neighbors had been parking automobiles on the cemetery lot. The village tried to have them stop, but it would only be for a while. The homeowner had even paved over part of the cemetery. In 2006, a meter reader found the tombstone for Nellie Wood, who died in 1838, in the basement of a house. He convinced the homeowner to give the tombstone to the Webster Museum, where it is now. In 2011, the village used ground penetrating radar on the cemetery, and then they said they found about 15 burials total. 2013, New York State determined that as the cemetery was abandoned, the cemetery belonged to the town of Webster. Then the town of Webster deeded the cemetery over to the village of Webster. On May 15th, 2015, the cemetery was rededicated, and they put up this very nice sign. On it is a picture of Nellie Wood's tombstone. Lastly, in 2016, the village had an archaeological team look for buried tombstones. They didn't find any. Pioneer Burying Ground of Penfield was located near the southwest corner of Penfield Road and 5 Mile Line Road. It began in the 1790s or early 1800s. In 1826, the burials were dug up, and those that could be identified were moved to Oakwood Cemetery. There were about 60 burials that couldn't be identified, and those were buried under the new red brick Presbyterian Church. In 1878, the Presbyterian Church sold the building to the Evangelical Society to use as their church. Then in 1914, it was sold and converted into 3 apartments. It remained as an apartment building until the 1950s. Notice the building on the left of the church. That building is still there, and it is on this Google Street Map. So the 60 burials are still right there under the parking lot of this auto repair business. A Baptist cemetery was located in Pittsford at the intersections of Mendon Center, Toby, and Calkins Roads. It was used until 1880. It is still indicated on this 1902 map. After that time, 30 interments were transferred to both the Pioneer and Pittsford cemeteries, but no records of any names were recorded. It appears that the Mendon Center Elementary School is on that property now. The Beers-Billinghurst Cemetery in Pittsford was a small family cemetery. It was located at 564 Mendon Road on the property of this old house. At an unknown date, 5 burials were moved to the Pittsford Cemetery, where there is this boulder with the names of the 5 on a plaque. In Henrietta, there was a Quaker cemetery near the northwest corner of Calkins and East Henrietta Roads. In this deed from 1859, Hiram Calkins is buying the lot the cemetery was on, but it says that it excluded the cemetery lot, which was 15 rods by 8 rods, that being 3/4 of an acre. Early Quakers were known for simple tombstones with just initials or no tombstones at all. The cemetery sat undisturbed until 1985, when some bones and part of a wooden coffin were dug up while laying a sewer line. It's possible that the cemetery may still be there without any tombstones. Hedgley Cemetery in Wheatland was located on the southeast corner of Chili Avenue and North Road. There were 15 burials total, but only 2 tombstones were legible in the 1930s. The other graves were marked with just field stones. To make room for a new school in 1956, all the remains were placed in one box and buried together in a Watka cemetery. The 2 tombstones were placed over the graves. Wheatland Friends Cemetery was on River Road just south of Scottsville. It is shown on this map from 1872. By 1887, all remains had been removed to other cemeteries without any records being made. In the town of Gates was the Waffle Road Cemetery that shows only on this map from 1902. It doesn't show up on any later map. So, was it moved or not? Well, no one's really sure. Waffle Road is now called Fisher Road. This view of the location by Google Maps shows a slight knoll where the cemetery was, or maybe still is. There surely aren't any tombstones there now. This cemetery in the town of Clarkson never had a name. It was located near the northwest corner of Lawrence Road and Sweden Walker Road on the Harvey Harden farm. This newspaper article says that Harvey Harden was charged that on September 1, 1879, he, quote, entered an ancient burial ground and there willfully, maliciously, and feloniously, and from mere wantonness, removed the dead body of a certain person, end quote. It finally went to trial in May 1880. Mr. Harden said that he had accidentally plowed up the bones while making a drain on his property. He was found not guilty of the charge. According to another newspaper article, a small burial ground dated back to 1800. After the trial, the town of Clarkson said that they had control of the old cemetery because it was considered abandoned. So in 1881, they sent Charles Armour to determine the borders of the cemetery. Mr. Harmon had Mr. Armour arrested for trespass. That also went to court, where Mr. Harden was awarded 6 cents for the trespass. The small cemetery is no longer in that spot. The former town historian said it was probably moved to Garland Cemetery, but we really aren't sure when. St. Mary's Cemetery was the first cemetery of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Brockport, but it is in the town of Clarkson. It's on 1.8 acres at 275 East Avenue, partway down a road that goes to the Brockport Sewage Treatment Plant. The cemetery began in 1856 and was used until 1892 when Mount Olivet Cemetery started. A few burials got moved to Mount Olivet, and then the old cemetery ended up being neglected. In the 1950s, most of the tombstones were bulldozed into a pile. In 1990-91, the town built an earthen berm, placed about 100 tombstones on that berm, and then cemented them in. You can see that when I visited there last in the summer of 2022, the berm was very overgrown. Over the years, there have been a few lists of tombstones and burials of this cemetery. The most up to date is this one that is on the Town of Clarkson website. Pioneer Cemetery, as referenced by its name, was the oldest cemetery in the town of Ogden. It was small with only about 20 burials. It was at 1415 South Union Street in Spencerport. In 1955, the lot was bought by Ransom I. Page. He said he consulted a lawyer first, but still had the cemetery bulldozed. I say his lawyer gave him bad advice. This article in the Democrat Chronicle shows that local officials had no problem with the destruction of the cemetery. Mr. Page built an appliance store on the location, but he must have had second thoughts about the cemetery, as in 1957 he placed this memorial on the rear of his property. It sits on a steep slope right next to a dumpster. The building is now occupied by Kitchens by Countryside. The only thing that might be positive in the story of this cemetery is that a list of tombstones was made in the 1930s by a couple of ladies from the Daughters of the American Revolution. The Shaffer Cemetery is also in the town of Ogden on the corner of Washington Street and Dresser Road. There are only about 20 total burials. Over the years, most of the tombstones fell over or got knocked down. Then, as a Boy Scout project, the tombstones got reset. As no one knew the original location of any of the tombstones, the Boy Scouts set them up in a half circle pattern. So, this is one small rural cemetery that ended up in fairly good shape. Wagner Farm Cemetery, also known as Big Ridge Cemetery, Orchard Cemetery, and Grease Wagner Cemetery, was off Long Pond Road in Grease. The town of Grease mowed as best they could, but a lot of the tombstones got overturned through the years. That didn't really create many problems until the lot was going to be sold as the new Park Ridge Hospital. Then a push came for the old cemetery to be moved. In spite of a protest by a descendant of one of the persons buried there, all burials were moved to a 40 by 40 feet lot in Falls Cemetery in November 1967. Only 19 burials could be identified from tombstones and brass plates on the coffins. Altogether, there were 137 burials that were removed. The webpage for this cemetery has the 19 known burials and a link to this map that shows the layout of the plot in Falls Cemetery. The North Grease Cemetery is located at 38 Peck Road in the town of Grease. When you drive by it, it looks like an empty lot. There are tombstones there, but they're all laying flat to the ground. Revolutionary War veteran Jonathan Wilkinson has a historic marker for his burial at this cemetery, but his tombstone is also laying flat. That smaller buried tombstone behind the planter is the tombstone for his wife. Scott B. has begged the town of Grease to let him restore the cemetery and stand the tombstones back up again. They keep telling him that they would rather have the tombstones lay flat in the ground. Every time I visited the cemetery over the last 35 years, there seems to be less tombstones. At least we have a list of the tombstones that were there at one time. This completes the tour of all the tragic cemeteries in the towns of Monroe County. But I'd like to also talk to you about some burials that we have from the Revolutionary War that were moved here from out of town. During the Revolutionary War, the Senecas sided with the British. General John Sullivan was sent in to destroy Seneca villages to drive the Senecas out of western New York. In 1779, a scouting party was sent out headed by Lieutenant Thomas Boyd and Sergeant Michael Parker. They were ambushed by the Senecas in Groveland, Livingston County, and most of the U.S. troops died there. Parker and Boyd were captured and taken to near Cuylerville, where they were tortured and then killed. General Sullivan found the dead soldiers in Groveland and buried them there. And he also found the remains of Boyd and Parker and buried them where they lay. In 1841, the local militia of Rochester proposed to remove the remains of Boyd and Parker to a fitting memorial in Mount Hope Cemetery in Rochester. With much great pomp and circumstance, they removed Boyd, Parker, and also the soldiers buried in Groveland to Mount Hope. They were buried in Mount Hope in Section R, which was originally to be Revolutionary Hill. But there were a few other Revolutionary War soldiers that wanted to be buried there. So in 1864, Section R was re-terraced, and the cemetery manager had all these Revolutionary War soldiers reburied in Section Y, which was for paupers' graves. In 1903, a group from the Rochester Daughters of the American Revolution obtained a nice lot in Section BB in Mount Hope, and they moved all the Revolutionary War soldiers to their fourth and hopefully last burial location. There is this nice boulder with a plaque of the names of the soldiers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed making this presentation. And I hope you learned something about the old cemeteries of Monroe County.